Hi, everyone. I'm Donna Merkt. Welcome to the summer Thursday edition of Oklahomans Are Amazing. We want to give a special shout out to our free family fun sponsors, the Chickasaw Nation and the Inasmuch Foundation. Today, we're joined by Emma Fritz and Bradley Fritch, who are going to be interviewing our very special guest, Commander John Herrington. Commander Herrington was inducted into the Oklahoma Hall of Fame in 2019. He is a retired United States naval aviator, naval test pilot, and NASA astronaut. Commander Herrington was the 143rd person and the first Native American in history to walk in space. He has logged over 330 hours in space and completed over 19 hours of extravehicular activity. That means he was outside the space shuttle or station. Since retiring, Commander Herrington has been hard at work promoting STEM for kids and even wrote the children's book, Mission to Space. Before I turn the floor over to Emma and Bradley, I just need to ask one question. Commander Herrington, could you please share with us your favorite thing about being an astronaut?
Being an astronaut, the best thing about being an astronaut is you get to fly in space. The favorite thing I did as an astronaut was to spacewalk. I think the high point of my professional career was to go out the hatch a couple times feet first, once head first, and then to go out and to do work at about 220 miles to 250 miles above the Earth and hang on by a thumb and a forefinger as you go around the Earth at 17,500 miles an hour. So that was the high point of my professional career.
Sounds like literally it might have been the high point of your career.
Yeah, it was a high point. Very good. I didn't think about that. Yeah.
Well, that does sound, that is, like Bradley said, that is absolutely a high point. So one thing we've noticed is that lots of astronauts seem to have backgrounds in aviation and pilot training and stuff. Can you tell us how that prepared you for being an astronaut and how it compared to your actual astronaut training that you've had?
Sure. Well, actually, the reality about half of the people that are in the astronaut office, at least when I was there, were military aviators, were in the military, and the majority of them were in aviation. So my background started off, my dad was a pilot. He was a flight instructor when I was a little kid. I think the first time I ever flew in an airplane, I was probably, I don't know, 4 or 5, flying from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma to Colorado Springs, Colorado, in an old airplane, Central Airlines. Then my dad had a small plane that we flew in to and from Oklahoma when I lived in Colorado. And then my dad bought a plane. He bought a little teeny plane that had 2 seats in it, and I had a chance to fly with my dad. And he actually taught me how to fly. I gave him my first flying lesson because he was an instructor when I was probably about 10. But I've been very comfortable in airplanes my entire life because I started off really, really early.
Awesome. Thank you so much for explaining that to us. So you already kind of answered the first part about what was your favorite part about being in space. But what do you miss the most about being an astronaut or even being in outer space as well?
The one I miss most is working with the people that I had in the astronaut office. One of the neat things about having a job that you love is you get to work with a lot of people that love their job too. And we all had this common bond that we were all striving to either support flying in space or actually flying in space. And it was a lot like being, I was a naval aviator. I used to be in a squadron in the Navy. That means I flew airplanes in the Navy and had a bunch of people that did the same thing. And so we all had this common bond we could always talk about. We knew what the other person was thinking about and how, what was important to them. And I enjoyed that camaraderie, we would call it, working with people like that. And then when you fly in space, you've trained with imagine you have a friend in class that you've had, from 3rd grade to 5th grade. And in each of those years, you get to become really good friends with that person or those people. And so when you train for a space flight, you will train for probably anywhere from 1 to 2 years, sometimes longer, with those same people. And so you become very, very good friends and with the people you fly in space with. So you go to space and you know people really well, and so it's fun. It makes it a lot more enjoyable.
So I'm curious what you missed most when you were in space. So what part of life here did you miss the most while you were gone?
I missed the sensation that the only thing that was up was what I saw was up, not what I felt was up or down. You know, gravity, you go around the Earth so fast, and gravity's still there, hasn't gone anywhere, but you're going so fast as gravity pulls the spaceship, the space shuttle, back to Earth, and the space station. As it pulls it back to Earth, the Earth falls away. So you're in this constant free fall around the Earth. So what I missed most was the sensation of floating. The sensation that I can be in one spot in the space station and not touch anything. You reach over, you can't touch the wall, you can't touch the floor. You can swim, and move around because there's air inside the vehicle. But it's a sensation that, okay, I'm gonna turn upside down. You turn upside down, you're not upside down because gravity is not telling you which way is up or down. I missed that. That was a lot of fun.
That does sound like a lot of fun.
It certainly doesn't sound like a place for somebody that has like motion sickness or something like that.
Well, some people do get sick. One of the first things that happens, it's a neat name for it. They call it stomach awareness. And the reason they say stomach awareness is whatever you ate before you launched is now no longer in your tummy down here. It feels like it's up here. And so if you've ever had that feeling like you're going to throw up, the sandwich is kind of it feels like it's finding its way up. And so you're very aware of what's in your stomach. And so, and some people get really aware of what's in their stomach. I didn't get sick when I went to space. Some people do. But it's a really strange sensation that you feel. But it goes away, I'd say after about a day, maybe a day and a half. It goes away and you can go upside down, right side up. They said one thing you don't want to do is turn your head really quickly. When you first get to space, don't do that. Because if you do this, you do that, that's going to happen. And so you kind of do this really slow motion back and forth until you get used to being in space.
Good to know. So that kind of led us right into this. What was the hardest thing you had to do in order to be an astronaut? So we've talked some about your training and stuff like that, but what was the hardest part of your training to become an astronaut?
I think one of the hardest parts about it is that you're away from your family a lot. You're training, you work really, really hard. You're going here, you fly there. I lived in Florida off and on for a couple of years as an astronaut. So I think one of the hardest parts on your family life, it is a challenge because you have to put a lot of time and effort into it, and a lot of times you just can't be home, and so that's unfortunate. That was a personal thing. One of the hardest parts about actually being an astronaut is the work. Is you're always in the simulator. You're always studying something. Imagine just because you graduate from high school when you're in 12th grade and you go to college and you're in college for how many ever years, or you go to grad school, you're always studying. Even when you graduate, even when you become an astronaut, you keep studying. So you're always studying because you have to learn. You're learning things that will keep you alive. You're learning the things that matter because if you don't know them, you can get hurt or the people you're flying with can get hurt. And so there's a much more, let's say, not stronger reason, but you know why you're studying. You're not looking at the book going, when am I going to use this? You know when you're going to use it. And so it's imperative. It is very important that you pay attention and you study really hard because there's no teacher standing there telling you, your parents looking over you going, you got to do this. You learn how to do it and you do it well.
Yeah, it sounds like definitely hard work is definitely a very important part of being an astronaut. So you kind of mentioned that when you moved around in outer space, you swam around a little bit. Was it hard to move around, or was that kind of your preferred method to get around as well?
Okay, well, in there's two different ways. Imagine, when you're swimming, you move your arms and you push the water out of the way. Well, in the space shuttle, inside the space station, you have air, just like we have, around us here on the Earth. So when you move your arms, you're actually moving against this stuff. You're moving against the air. You can actually, if you do enough of this, you'll slowly move. You go outside the spaceship, and you're out in what's called a vacuum. There is no atmosphere. There is no air. You can do this all day long, and you're not going to go anywhere. So, if you come away from the space station, you're doing a spacewalk, you let go, and you get about, this far, and you can't touch it, swimming all day long is not going to get you back to the handrail. You may be able to move your whole body and reach it, but if you're a few feet away and you try and swim, you're not pushing against anything, and so you're stuck. Now, don't do that. That's not a good idea.
Yeah, no, that does not sound like a great time.
No, it does not. So how did you get back? You were tethered. So is that how you got back to the spaceship and to the shuttle in that case?
Well, my mom told me to not let go. And when you do let go, make sure you're tethered. So what they train us as astronauts is anytime you have one tether that's about 55 feet long, and it's a metal cable, and it's about the diameter of a pencil. If you look at the end of a pencil, a lead pencil, that's about how thick it is. And it's on a little reel, and it's hooked to my side. And as I move, it unreels out of that reel. So it's about 55 feet long. Now, if I let go, that reel has a spring in it, kind of like a fishing reel, and it'll actually reel me back in really slowly. So if I let go, that would reel me back into wherever it's attached. You don't want that to happen, because if you let go and it starts pulling you away from your work site, that's not good. So we have another tether, usually two more. And if I want to let go, I make sure that tether is hooked to the space station. And I can actually have one that can clamp on the space station, tighten it down, and I can let go and not go anywhere. So that's how you can actually do work. You can let go, use your hands, use your tools, but you have a physical piece of hardware hooked to you that keeps you in that spot. Now, when you want to move again, you take that piece off, you release it, you put it away, and you don't spacewalk, you space crawl. Doesn't sound, spacewalking sounds really cool, right? Well, you're actually space crawling because your feet just hang there. They don't do anything. They just hang there, and you just kind of pull your whole body along with your hands.
Well, space crawling does not sound as cool as spacewalking, but we'll go with it. If that's what it takes, we're going to go with it.
I'm a space crawler, yeah.
So you mentioned that you're in a vacuum when you're outside the spacecraft. How does being in a vacuum compare to life underwater?
Okay, well, life underwater, we actually trained to spacewalk underwater. In Houston, there's a big pool. It's about 200 feet long, 100 feet wide, about 40 feet deep. And they actually train us to spacewalk in that pool. Okay, well, if you drop a rock into a lake, or drop a rock into a pond or a swimming pool, the rock is going to sink to the bottom. Well, we have a 300-pound spacesuit on, okay? So if you drop me in the water, I'm going to sink right to the bottom. So what they do is they have a bunch of foam rubber. They have a bunch of flotation, like you're wearing a life jacket. They put foam rubber all around your body, and so when they drop you in the water, you actually are what's called neutrally buoyant. You actually will stay in one place. And so that simulates this idea of no gravity, and allows you to move yourself around the space station, the mock-up, using your hands, just like you would in space. The only problem is you have water that pushes against you. So as I start to move through the water is going to say, no, you don't. It's going to slow you down. And so in space, when you do the same movement, there's nothing pushing against you, and so you can actually move really fast. One of the things we said in spacewalking, in space, slower is faster. Just move really slow, because if you move really fast, you can actually get out of control. So you take your time, be really, really, really cautious with where your hands go, where your tools are, and just understand where you're at, and don't forget that you can get tangled up in your cables and stuff. That's not good either.
Doesn't sound good, no. So we talked earlier about how you have spent a little bit of time underwater as well, just a little bit.
Yep.
So how did life in space compare to life underwater? I know you spent about 10 days underwater. So how did that kind of compare?
Yeah. Well, I spent 10 days underwater in a place down in Florida, down a place called Key Largo. There's a university that has this, if you can imagine, a small school bus, essentially underwater at about 60 feet below the surface. And we scuba dive down to this habitat, we call it habitat. And then once you get in the habitat, they have air, they have oxygen inside there. So you can take out your mask and take all your swimsuit off, your scuba gear and all those, and you live underwater for 10 days. The problem with that is that the air that you breathe when you're really deep like that, there's a stuff in the air. We have oxygen and nitrogen. Those are the two components in what we breathe. Lots of nitrogen. There's like 80% nitrogen, 20% oxygen. And so you get a lot of this nitrogen in your bloodstream. Well, if I swam back to the surface, that nitrogen that's in my blood is going to turn into a bubble, and that bubble is going to hurt me. And so one thing we're not allowed to do is go to the surface, because if you swim to the surface because you're out of air, you're probably going to die, and that's not a good thing. So it's kind of the same thing in space. There's no water, but going outside, you have to have air. You have to have your oxygen. You have to be very, very careful. So living underwater is a lot like being in space, because this outside's dangerous. Outside the habitat's dangerous. You do a spacewalk. You do a scuba dive out of the habitat. It's wet. It's not wet upstairs. It's wet downstairs. But you see little teeny things. I saw. You don't see any aliens. Underwater, you see aliens. You see fish. You see shrimp. You see things you've never ever seen before underwater. And it's amazing to see the amount of life that exists underwater in this absolutely beautifully pristine, gorgeous environment. You don't see the same thing in space. I've never seen an alien. Haven't. I believe life exists in the universe, but it hasn't come to visit us. And when it does, I got a lot of questions, if it ever does. But it was neat. It was like living. It was like space, but a lot quicker to get to and a lot wetter. How about that?
It's a good way to put it.
So in addition to being wetter outside the sea base, I guess you would call it, you mentioned that you saw, all sorts of sea life and that sort of thing. Did that make being under the sea more interesting than being up in outer space?
No, I think they both have their special qualities. I'd come out in a scuba dive, and the fish are right there. They're all swimming around you. You'd see barracuda, and you took all the shiny stuff off your hands so the barracuda don't come get your fingers. We had a grouper, huge fish, about the size of a small Volkswagen, I guess. Really, really big fish. I had I came out once. I filled up my tanks with air, and the guy I was scuba diving with turned around and looked at me, and his eyes got like this big, and he pointed. He's like, and I turn around, and here's this big, huge manta ray coming right at me, doing this big, huge flip, eating. It's eating as it's flipping over me, and it came right at me and went, whoa, that doesn't happen in space. And if it did, that would be pretty interesting, for sure.
Yeah.
So you've told us now about space and being underwater. So do you have a preference? Did you prefer one over the other?
Yeah, fun in space is everybody has to do it once. I mean, we can all scuba dive. You can learn how to scuba dive. You can go in the lake and in the ocean and see beautiful things. But I think at some point in time, everybody has to experience what it's like to be able to see the Earth from this incredible vantage point. And then I think in doing so, it really makes you appreciate the fact that you get to live here. It really gets to appreciate the fact that we get to live on the surface of this incredibly beautiful planet when you see it from a different perspective, and you realize it's not as big as you think it is, and it makes you feel really, really small. And I think I would hope in my lifetime we get a chance where people can fly in space on a routine basis. And I was fortunate that it was my job. I got to do it.
Yeah, me personally, I'm happy here on Earth. I know that I'm sure the phenomenon is quite fantastic, and seeing Earth, I'm sure it's humbling to say the least while you are in outer space.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt.
So we actually do have a question in the chat. Someone would
Yay.
like they're curious about your current adventure in your Volkswagen, and if this allows you to meet lots of new people.
What I do now? Oh yeah. Well, right now, I think we all know we can't go out and do things that we used to do. Socially isolating. I'm the only one in my van. It's just me, and I miss being able to go out and talk about what I had a chance to do. I spent 2 weeks in space. Fundamentally changed my life, and I'm very fortunate that I had a chance to do that. And it's my responsibility to share that experience with others. And so I like to get out and meet a lot of folks. I made an IMAX movie recently in the past couple of years. Went all across the United States and filmed in these beautiful locations with a really nice young woman named Ariel Tweedo. And had a chance, was supposed to go out and we premiered the movie in February, and the pandemic was just getting started right there. And so I couldn't, I was supposed to go to Barcelona, I was supposed to go to Madrid, I was supposed to go to Mexico City, Switzerland, and all across the United States. But I will, hopefully in a few months, when this dies down, I'll get a chance to go back out and meet people and share my stories.
I hope you get to do that soon too. Another question in the chat is they are wondering if you were ever scared while you were in space, if you ever made a mistake and had to think quickly to fix it.
Oh, excellent question. I wouldn't say I was scared. You're cautious. You can't let being scared and being so in fear of being there that you can't do your job. So you're cautious to make sure you don't make a mistake. Well, guess what? We all make mistakes. And I think astronauts are more not scared of dying, they're scared of making mistakes. And unfortunately, we make mistakes. I made a couple. One was my fault. I took out the wrong tool on one of my spacewalks. And I felt really bad. I just felt really, really bad because I had made this, I made a mistake, and I don't like to make mistakes. So luckily for me, I like to work with my hands. I work on Volkswagens like this thing right here. I work with tools, and I was very comfortable being able to solve problems. A problem solver meant that I went out with the wrong tool, but I realized that I didn't need the tool I was supposed to have. I could do the exact same job with what I had in my stuff. And I thought about it real quick, and I called to Houston on the radio, and I said, hey, let me do it this way. And they said, okay, stand by. That was a long standby. And they go, yeah, that makes sense. Go ahead and do it. And so I was able to solve my own mistake and be able to overcome what I had done wrong because I used this guy right here and my previous experience working with tools to be able to solve the problem. Another time, something got stuck on the outside of the space station. Wasn't my fault. Wasn't anybody's fault. It was an interference problem. Something bumped into something else, and it was my job to go out and fix it. And in doing so, I had to change my whole spacewalk. And what I trained for 2 years to do, I could not do now. And so now I had to figure out, well, how am I going to do that same job without the other stuff I needed? And we figured it out. We did everything we were trained to do, and then some. And so I was able to overcome a problem and still do my job and do it even better, even though I'd never trained to do it that way. And that was a feeling I'll never ever forget. That's a wonderful feeling.
Yeah, that does sound like an absolutely unforgettable feeling. We have another question from the chat. What planets did you see in outer space?
This one, right here. You're not that far. If you can imagine, I don't have anything here. If you can imagine have a 16-inch beach ball. Grab a beach ball sometime and look at it, and imagine that's the Earth. The space shuttle and the space station is only a finger width above the surface of that big ball, but we're going really, really fast. Okay, so you get a beautiful view of the Earth, but you don't see it like this where you cover it up with your thumb. The moon is only about 240 miles closer. The moon is actually 240,000 miles away, so you're not that much closer to the moon. Any planets you see out there would be like seeing Mars or Venus in the night sky. Kind of imperceptible piece of light, point of light, reflected light from the sun. You don't see any other planets other than the one that's right below you or above you or wherever. Yeah.
So another one we have in the chat is, what was your favorite thing to eat in space, and what food did you miss from here while you were there?
Okay, you get to test all the food that they have on the menu. You get a menu, and you go in the kitchen on Earth, and you taste all this food, and the stuff you like, you get to put on your menu, and the stuff you don't like, you tell them, I don't like eggplant, I don't want eggplant, I don't want no eggplant. And I didn't eat eggplant, but you can eat it if you want. I had chicken fajitas. I had shrimp cocktail. Shrimp cocktail was really, really good because it had cocktail sauce. And one of the things about being in space is you end up, the liquid in your body now in space is now kind of floating. And so if there's any liquid in your head, and it's in your sinuses, you feel really congested. It's like your head's full of water. And so your taste buds change. And I really wanted spicy food. So shrimp cocktail sauce, it clears your head. It's like eating horseradish and lights your sinuses up. Peanut butter and jelly, peanut butter and syrup. I used to put big peanut butter and squirt syrup on it, and it sticks to the peanut butter on a tortilla, and I'd roll it up and I'd eat it. I ate peanut butter and syrup as a kid. I had candy bars, I had pistachios, I had barbecue beef, I had all kinds of stuff. No pizza, no bananas, and no fish. And I want you guys to guess why no bananas and why no fish. Any idea?
I'm almost scared to guess.
In my research, the only reason you don't eat fish is because you observe kosher dietary restrictions.
No, that is one reason. But no, imagine you eat a can of tuna or you eat some salmon or something. You leave the bag out for a few days. Starts to stink really bad.
Yeah,
bananas. My commander said no bananas because one crew actually went up with 6 bananas and they found 5 of them. And the 6th one was hidden, it had gotten lost somewhere, and they found it squished behind some of the hardware, and they only found it because they could smell it. So my commander said no fish, no bananas, and that's one thing. Some crews do, we didn't. My commander said no.
That seems like a smart decision.
Yeah, I'm glad he did.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, we have one last question for you, and someone would like to know if you ever miss going to outer space still.
Oh yeah, I miss going to space with my friends. I miss that feeling, that sensation of floating. When he came back, I'd lay in bed at night and I'd swear the ceiling was the floor. Because up in space it was. I could push off the floor and float to the ceiling and then be in the ceiling and think, I could push back and forth. I'd lay in bed at night and you get about 45 degrees over and it feels like something on the bed reaches up and grabs you and pulls you down because you're not used to being heavy again. I do miss that. I miss that sensation. But life on Earth's a wonderful thing. And I wish I could have flown, for a year, like one of my friends did in my class, 6 months on the space station. Unfortunately, I have a medical issue that kept me from flying long periods like that. But there's one thing to work in space and live in space. And I got a chance to kind of do both, and that was great.
Well, I abide by wanting all of us to be able to go to space one day. Bradley, I don't think it's a requirement, but if it's ever possible, I'm definitely going to do it.
Yeah,
so,
we'll drag Bradley along.
We'll drag him with. There we go.
Yeah, it would
all
have
right.
to
Well,
be
Commander Herrington, thank you so much for joining us today. We can't thank you enough for your time and for sharing all of this information with us. And we know everyone's really enjoyed it. And we look forward to being able to see you soon when all of this is done. We look forward for you to be able to travel and promote your movie as well. So thank you all for joining us for this this edition of Summer Thursdays. Oklahomans are amazing. We give Commander Herrington a big thank you for joining us, and we can't wait to see you guys next week.
Okay,
and
wash your hands, wear a mask, stay safe. Okay, very important. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye-bye.